In the world of business building, we often wonder if it could get any more complicated. GRC, GDPR, ESG, zero carbon, green hydrogen, cybersecurity, and big data. Let's not forget the long funding processes that can make you crazy. If you are a world changing founder and innovator, how do you connect with the support that you need to move ahead? Well, this podcast puts the people, planet, profit through partnerships theory to action by helping you to see opportunities in every episode to create a meaningful partnership. The innovators, experts, and diplomats we interview are all looking for partners, and that could be you. No time like the present to find out. So, welcome to Frontrunners Innovate with your host, global business developer Mary Curick. Hello, everyone. Today we are taking a good look at carbon credits and how they are working to help businesses reduce emissions and get us right with our planet. If we can get there, that's for sure. Coinciding with the Better Planet Directive is basically the way I look at it. And I'm Mary Curick. I'm president of Frontrunners Development, a global business development company that connects impact partners. So today's guest is Tiffany Potter, and she is the Chief Carbon Officer for Bitgreen, and she's going to enlighten us about Bitgreen's carbon marketplace, which I think is really interesting. Co-hosting today is Don Turner, COO of H2 Energy Group and working with green hydrogen projects. So let's get started. So I'm going to go to you first, Don, and let you tell us a little bit about yourself and H2 Energy Group.
Sure. Real quickly, as you mentioned, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of H2 Energy Group. We are a producer of green energy, specifically green hydrogen and net zero electricity. We do this through a biomass-based, renewable, and sustainable system with proprietary technology. My career originally started off in the automotive industry. Then I went to aerospace. Last 25 years has essentially been in high tech, everything from voice recognition to artificial intelligence. Been group president of a public telecom company, chief strategy officer and architect of a $1 billion IPO, and then a CEO of 5 different high-tech software companies. And about 2 years ago, I became part of the environmental movement and joined H2 Energy Group. Had to relearn how to spell chemistry, but I handle basically operations, engineering, and I also do a lot of the marketing. So that's my background, and kind of an eclectic way to get here, but fully committed to the environmental movement and trying to make this place a little bit better for my grandchildren.
Yeah, that's what we all think about. So thank you very much. Tiffany, we're going to come to you now and talk to us a little bit about your background. I mean, this is an interesting field. You're young, so it makes sense that all this resonates with you and the pathway forward. But this whole the climate change and all the relative occupations around it, and the carbon emissions and the carbon credits and that sort of thing, fairly new for all us to talk about. So how did you come into this world?
Sure. Well, thanks, Mary, for hosting us. And about being young, flattery will get you everywhere. How I got into the space is what isn't the most typical way. I started as a wildlife biologist. I was a forester, and I worked for the Forest Service and out in Alaska and then in Oregon. And then I ended up working for 8 years in Yellowstone National Park, tracking the distribution of Canada lynx. And I deeply cared about endangered species. Yeah. And I realized in a snow cave at -40, when I was really cold, that a lot of the research I was doing was going into a drawer, and that command and control and governments telling people what to do maybe wasn't the most effective form of conservation. It mattered to me, but I realized it didn't matter to a lot of other people. So I started thinking in that snow cave that if you could profit from conservation of water, energy, or forests, people would probably care. So I started learning about environmental finance. And at that time, that was about 2004. That's when the United Nations came out with the Clean Development Mechanism, which was a facility to invest in developing countries, cleaner energy, and to basically be able to gain a benefit from it, from a carbon credit being sold. And that's when my whole focus changed. And I went to Yale. I studied environmental finance and got into environmental finance, and then have been working primarily in the financial sector ever since. So it's a huge 180 in my career. I think a lot of people were wondering what I was doing on Park Avenue after a year and a half, after 2 years before I'd been in Yellowstone National Park, snow tracking lynx. But after doing it for 16 years, what I've realized is that you can make money in the sector by doing good, and there can be benefits to the planet, people, and the profits can be decent. And so I think what's exciting is I've worked on some really revolutionary projects in my career. One of my favorites is a seaweed project where all the seaweed is rolling up on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico from Cancun to St. Kitts. And it's coming from the conversion of forests to agriculture in South America. All this nitrogen is flowing in the Amazon River, and all this seaweed is accumulating. And one of my favorite projects that I've worked on out of 4,000 converts the seaweed into other products, bioplastics, biofertilizers,
Wow.
bioleather. And it's through these kinds of projects that you can create a carbon credit and create a dividend for investors. And I've worked on all kinds of carbon projects, ones that are nature-based, renewable energy projects for publicly traded companies, to energy efficiency projects. And there's just a ton of innovation, a ton of creativity, a lot like what Don Turner's working with green hydrogen. And I love helping small businesses and mid-sized businesses and even large businesses figure out how to become greener while making a profit while conserving water, energy, and forests.
Yeah. Well, but before I turn it over to Don, because I know he's probably got some comments and questions, because what you're speaking his language in that biomass stuff, conversion. But let's get everybody clear on what a carbon credit actually is, if you'll define that or at least paint a picture of how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. So a carbon credit has three things in common. It is a project that uses a publicly vetted or peer-reviewed methodology. So the methodology by which you look at the project area and the baseline and account for the emissions, that process has been created with scientists and has been available to the public to comment. So that's the one key thing, that publicly vetted methodology. The second thing is it represents 1 metric ton of carbon that is either avoided, destroyed, or sequestered. So it could be sequestered in a tree. It can be avoided in terms of there's a forest conservation project. Instead of cutting down trees, you conserve them, or you're utilizing methane, that type of thing. Then the last thing is that these carbon credits, when they are issued, they are certified by an objective third party, and there is a public registry where you can go and you can see the serial numbers identifying each ton of metric carbon that's been issued through these credits. So it's that registry, that 1 ton, and the fact that it equals 1 ton avoided, destroyed, or sequestered.
So how does that convert into financial benefit when you're talking about, the finances of environmental conservation?
Sure. Well, the whole reason why carbon markets were started in the first place is to help financing a transition that is otherwise not that attractive. I mean, business as usual, using oil, using all the traditional ways that we run our economy is profitable. And you need to give an incentive for an investor to go into Africa to develop clean energy. There's too much political upheaval in certain places. There's too many unknowns. You need to give somebody an incentive. So not every project is guaranteed. I mean, there are risky projects and there are safer projects, but the idea is that you give this credit to the product developer and the investor to sell. And looking at the way carbon prices are going, I think the last time we looked at the IMF, they said that the cost of carbon was about $70 a ton. Carbon credits are moving up in price year after year after year. So if you have the right project and the right design and the right team of people, you can put together and fund an innovation like the seaweed project that could not otherwise get a bank loan. So the seaweed project, it's so unusual. Like when they first started, they couldn't just go to a community bank or Bank of America and get a loan because it was not well understood how successful it would be. But when an investor comes in and funds that project, it allows them to be able to invest and profit from the upward price in carbon that's expected in the future. Definitely not guaranteed, but likely looking at the cost of carbon where it's going.
That's interesting. I like that. Yeah. Don, thoughts, questions?
A bunch of them, but question for you: when you talk about carbon being sequestered, so you look at gray hydrogen, blue hydrogen, and green hydrogen. With blue hydrogen simply being gray hydrogen, but you capture the carbon dioxide, you bury it 800 meters in the ground. What's your thoughts on that? Is it, I'm an engineer. My belief is if you don't create the mess, you don't have to clean it up. And do you think that's viable for the long run to keep burying and getting carbon credits by basically putting the carbon dioxide and carbonate back in the ground?
Well, are you talking about geologic storage? I think it depends on the solution. I'm a big fan, I've been a big proponent of geologic storage. So there's a couple big projects that are doing direct air capture or they're doing biological carbon capture. And if you're putting the carbon into the ground, typically the most sure form of it is a saline aquifer, like up in North Dakota. What happens is the carbon actually gets injected into the ground and the saline aquifer absorbs the carbon and it basically absorbs and creates rock.
So it becomes part of the biology.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most permanent forms of carbon storage. And I wasn't a big fan at first. I thought it sounded too good to be true. But I went to a conference on this in North Dakota and they explained the geologic process of how this happens. That I think is actually one of the most permanent sources of a carbon storage. But it depends, of course, there's a little bit of risk when you inject it and how you pipe the carbon. But there are ways to de-risk it. But yes, I think it's totally possible. And it just has to be scientifically validated and proven that you have managed the risk for the future and you're doing it in a way that meets federal codes. There are federal rules on how you can do this now. So yeah, not anyone can do it, but yes.
We just keep planting trees and Arundo Donax and energy grass. I mean, people don't realize how much carbon dioxide is truly absorbed by trees. I became fascinated with the whole process. And a typical acre of forest will absorb about 4.2 tons of CO2 per year. We're looking at some energy crops that'll absorb over 13 tons of CO2 per year. But that being said, as you're a businessman, you're out there, you're running a company, you're working part for a company, independent of the financial investors, why should business professionals be aware of carbon credits?
Sure. I think the most important thing is that all these businesses that are producing products are selling to Gen Y and Gen Z, and they don't look at this as climate change. They look at it as a climate crisis. And I think if you're going to appeal to consumers, I think it really helps that you look at your emissions in your supply chains and you look towards creating some sort of net zero or carbon neutral goal. And it's going to help you sell your products. I mean, if that's what you're trying to do, appeal to consumers, you have to appeal to that client base that's there. Then I think the other thing is just risk. I mean, there are shareholders of large companies that are asking companies to de-risk and not have such a high greenhouse gas footprint. There are shareholders who invest their money into stocks and they're making their choices on what stocks to hold, in some cases based on the greenhouse gas footprint of companies. And then I think there's just the cost of carbon that is going up in the future, that no matter who becomes president and what happens with US climate policy, banks and insurance company have put up a price on carbon, and that has to be factored into your business scenario and your financials going forward. And if you don't, I think you're going to miss something that's really important to your bottom line.
Yeah, one question I've always, and maybe you can give me an answer, I'm always curious. So carbon credits, I see the value. If you're an investor, I want to invest in things that are environmentally friendly because, I was never a tree hugger. I'm not a tree hugger, but I'm an environmentalist. And I take a look at the CO2 parts per million in the atmosphere, and it's more than doubled in the last million years. And in the last million years, that doubling's come from the last 60 years. There's got to be some kind of coincidence there. But in terms of carbon credits, so what's the incentive? You're a large corporation with a large carbon footprint. As I understand it, you will buy carbon credits to offset your penalties for creating all that carbon. What's the incentive rather than just buying carbon credits to actually change my processes and become greener? Well, are we setting up a disincentive for the large carbon footprint corporations?
Can you rephrase the question? Are you asking me why should a large company that has lots of emissions, why should they be looking to carbon credits to offset their emissions and not address the underlying greenhouse gas emissions? Is that what your question is? Yeah. Okay, great. Well, there have been companies that have not looked at their footprint and bought carbon credits. it's questionable what the intentions are. I happen to think that a lot of companies have good intentions. I just think they have staff that don't quite understand how it really works. But the way the system is moving is that it's the standard practice right now is to look at your greenhouse gas footprint and make a plan to reduce it internally as much as possible and to go zero. But most companies can't go to net zero. They can't reach it unless you're a hobbit living under the ground with solar panels. You can't get to net zero emissions. So what companies are
By
trying
the
to
way,
do,
solar panels, as I always tell people, there's two things if you ever see made, you want nothing to do with them again, and that's solar panels and sausage. People don't. I mean, solar panels is not a clean process.
yeah, it's not a clean process, right? And so most companies can't get to net zero. They'll have to reduce their emissions as much as they can and buy offsets. So a lot of companies are sort of grappling with what to do internally. And there are some large emitters who are buying carbon credits. And I welcome them doing it because some companies, they are helping to fund a transition in
Good answer. Yeah.
decarbonizing our energy sector and funding nature-based solutions. I mean, all of us, none of us are angels. We all flip on our light switches. We all drive our cars. I would love to say no to big oil tomorrow, but the reality is we're all still connected to, we're all part of the process. Some of those big oil companies are investing in these alternatives. I'm not going to defend them, but there are some large companies that have pumped a lot of money into the space, and I don't think they should be demonized either. But what I think is the most important is that companies should hire objective outsiders to look at their carbon footprint, and they should focus on reducing their emissions first internally as much as they can, get it down as close to zero. And then when they can't get it down to completely zero, then they offset and they go towards carbon neutral with the remainder. And carbon offsets are not meant, in most cap and trade systems, they're not meant to last forever. And they're only meant to ease the cost of the transition. If we shut down power plants tomorrow all across the country, consumers would feel that. Most people couldn't afford an extra $50 in their energy bill. And it would probably be more than that if we shut down all these power plants. So offsets are meant to create a lower cost transition earlier on by companies choosing to use offsets or buying allowances. This is in a permitted system. And so they're not meant to be here forever. They're just meant to lower the cost of going lower in greenhouse gases today.
Okay, great. I'll ask one more question, and then Mary, I'll
Okay. All right.
you
Go
tell
ahead.
me when to stop asking questions. I'll keep
Okay, you could do one more. I'll have another one too.
Okay. Part of the problems we have, and we're a carbon negative company. We take biomass, so we create a syngas from it, and from that we can produce electricity or green hydrogen. Green hydrogen is a hot topic right now, particularly in California, which is banning all diesel, large, heavy transports here in the next 10 years. Our problem is we look at businesses around the world. There is no standards for carbon credits. There's no standard organization, single organization. It's like every country has got their own way to set up and manage carbon credits. How do we come up, or is it even possible to come up with a world standard? So when you start talking about carbon credits, I loved your definition of what a carbon credit represents, but the definitions, and there's so many different players in this space. How do we come up with a single standard that means the same thing no matter where you're at?
Well, we need comprehensive climate policy that all the large developing countries adopt. And that's why we don't have a single carbon standard, is that the United States doesn't have comprehensive climate policy, and states have had to come up with their own plans. So I fundamentally think we need something at the federal level of all countries. So in the lack of that, the voluntary carbon market has popped up, and the voluntary carbon market has largely followed a lot of the principles of the clean development mechanism that was launched by the United Nations. So there are some similarities in how they work. I think what's important is that standards be able to have a way to police themselves, these carbon standards. And so what I really love is ISEAL. ISEAL is the standard of standards. They help create rules around like how does fair trade operate. So gold standard is one of the only carbon standards that follow the rules of ISEAL. I think that all the carbon standards should be following the ISEAL standards, and it would be able to create sort of some more comprehensive ways of policing the market. If you have a carbon standard that's writing the rules, issuing the credits and then certifying the projects, that creates a conflict of interest within the standard. And so that's where I think we need to focus on, is making sure we remove those conflicts first. And that ISTIL standard sets up rules and guidance for how you can issue your own credits. It usually involves more objective parties coming in and looking at your processes. So I don't have a good answer for you, an easy answer. I mean, if we had federal comprehensive climate policy, then we wouldn't need voluntary carbon standards, and that would eliminate that need. But I'm hoping that more people just start looking internally at their own greenhouse gas emissions and their own footprints and realizing their impact on the environment and going to whatever carbon standard they feel comfortable with to offsetting their emissions. Of all the standards, I'd say that gold standard is probably my favorite, but a lot of them have great management, and they're producing really amazing projects. So I think it's important that people connect themselves with projects that matter to them. Some carbon projects provide a lot of social and economic co-benefits, like cook stove projects provide a way for people to get access to cleaner and cheaper and easier cooking. There's forest carbon projects that help protect their environment. There are hydrogen projects coming online that help to decarbonize our energy sector. So I think I don't have a good answer for you, but I think we will get somewhere soon with the cost of carbon going so high. It's going to force people to look at their own.
Okay. Well, I'll turn it back over to Mary in a little bit. I got some more questions specific about Bitgreen.
Develop some more questions.
I did not even ask you why we can't even come up with a common way to measure carbon footprint. People measure the whole carbon footprint.
That was my question.
Yeah,
there you go.
Differently.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Tiffany. That was my question.
It is complicated, but there are some simple tools. I think we can also overcomplicate things. There are some very simple footprinting tools. World Wildlife Federation, WWF, has a very simple tool. I think in these cases, we shouldn't overcomplicate it. We need to make our own choices to cleaner energy. We need to buy food that has less packaging. We need to be using less plastics. I mean, I think the footprint to me isn't as important as our own choices. How can we start walking more, biking more? How can we start looking at funding more renewable energy in our cities and communities? So I agree with you. It's not easy, but I don't think we should split hairs on it.
Yeah. It's I finally made the transition. I have a 30-ounce Yeti cup I take with me everywhere. Of course, I live in Texas. You gotta travel with one.
You need a 30-ouncer.
Yeah,
you do. But I explain to people that the Great Pacific Ocean garbage patch is twice the size of the state of Texas, and it's junk floating around our oceans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it is. It's bad. Tiffany, I want to get to what you really do at the company there and about the marketplace and where you're going with that. So share a little bit about the directories and the registries and where you're going with the
Sure. So I joined Bitgreen. Bitgreen was launched by Adam Carver in 2021, and he has this vision of raising $1 trillion for new economic systems for sustainable finance. And I really believe in his vision. He has a great social following. He's got amazing energy. And Bitgreen launched a marketplace with this amazing tech team, and it aims to be the lowest cost way of finding high quality carbon credits. We only charge 2% success fees, where brokers and traders and other players will charge somewhere between 10 and 30%. But we have a platform that allows multiple forms of currency, different international currencies. It's connected to MetaMask and to Coinbase, so it allows the use of cryptocurrency. Bitgreen was acknowledged by Gold Standard as a company to help them look at using blockchain and putting carbon credits on chain. So Gold Standard, which is one of my favorite standards, is looking at a way to open up the market to cryptocurrency in a way that is authorized and transparent and accountable. And I do think that tracking carbon credits using blockchain is the next level of assurance and transparency that we need to make sure that carbon credits are not sold multiple times. So Bitgreen has a blockchain system that gives numbers to every carbon credit into the transaction and has a way of tracking all the transactions that have happened. And our platform aims to allow project developers to regain some more independence and control over being able to sell their own carbon credits. There's a lot of third parties and middlemen who are coming in, and there are nonprofit groups and small businesses who are working on these carbon projects tirelessly, and for them to have to give up 10 or 30% to traders or brokers or investors is a huge amount. So we're trying to create a platform that has built-in KYC's know your client systems, where you can figure out who the buyers are with a credit card and a camera and a matching driver's license. That there are ways of tracking where the credits are going, if they are being retired or not. And I think our platform is really seamless and easy to use. And before, what would happen is project developers would have to use a third party to go sell 1,000 carbon credits. They'd have to sign an NDA. They'd have to do all this background checks on buyers, because some of those standards are now requiring that. And it's just, it's inefficient. So we're trying to make the whole system much more efficient for project developers and give a platform for buyers to look at really high quality projects. So I'm super excited about our platform, and it's going to be launching relatively soon in the next few weeks.
Okay, good. You're going to let us know about that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And one last question, then I'm going to, well, not last question, but I'll turn it back over to Don for any extra comments or questions. But, when you're talking about the platform and where people can go and look for, or create that search or sell their own, or, you could, I assume that you can help them, because I know what you do. You can actually help a company figure out, where they have the opportunity to create carbon credits, and then you have this platform there. So what's next for you guys? I mean, you're launching this coming up. So what's the next process for you? The next
Sure.
goal?
So we're looking to engage with anyone who wants to calculate their carbon footprint and lower their footprint. We're looking to engage with companies who are looking to replace either their plastics with a renewable substance, like in our seaweed project. If you're a company that uses a lot of plastic, a lot of leather, we're working with the seaweed company that produces a bioleather and a bioplastic and a biostimulant. If you're an agriculture company and you're using traditional fertilizers, we have tools and solutions that are a step before carbon credits to help lower the carbon footprint of a company by replacing a product with a lower GHG product. If people are investing in this market and they want to invest in a particular carbon project, we will be launching a carbon forwards database or a marketplace where people can invest in a future carbon project, which is kind of fun because sometimes people want to get in the ground level. So if investors want to find cool projects to invest in, they can contact us. And I'd say that we'll have a few other marketplaces. We're working with a group in the Amazon who help to catalog all the non-timber forest products coming out of indigenous groups that typically have relied on the Amazon forest to help get their products to market. So we'll have a marketplace for that. So if anyone is looking to be on our marketplace or launch a new marketplace that helps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we're also helping other companies place their products and help larger companies replace their higher GHG products with lower products. So yeah, anyone who wants to innovate in the space, it can be incredibly depressing, the state of the climate cycle and what's happening, but I only see innovation and opportunity for us to all try harder and, like Dawn, and innovate with their new ideas. So we have a lot of work to do to decarbonize our energy sector and to fund nature-based solutions, and we're here to help people explore that field.
Yeah. Gaps are opportunities. We always say that. Don, final questions, final words, and then I'll ask her her last question.
Yeah, just the last couple of questions. And I hope you folks hit a home run out of the park, because I'm hearing three things. I'm hearing, one, that in many ways you're an exchange. Do you do bidding, or is it simply I put a carbon credit up there with a price? Is there a bidding mechanism associated with it, or just somebody buys it at the price I list it at?
You buy it at the price that it's listed.
Okay.
But there is an ability to trade it later too. So you could hold it in your wallet and you could have the ability to trade it later.
And then if you feel forwards, it's actually what you're doing is and you got the financial background, but it sounds like you eventually you're going to get into energy derivatives. Um,
I mean, it's the derivatives aspect. I mean, we have to talk to our attorneys about that, but we're basically promising an issued credit in the future. So it's a forward product that people will get when it's issued. So I don't want to get
it's a place for it, because I set up an exchange years ago for platinum and aluminum in the automotive industry. And the problem was GM would consume $3 billion of aluminum. The only place to buy aluminum was pure aluminum at the London Metals Exchange, but you don't use pure aluminum with cars. So they would wait to the last second, take the pure aluminum forward, sell it, and buy alloyed aluminum. But the government said that's not an operational hedge and really hit them up on that. But the second thing I heard is crowdsourcing for environmental projects. I think that's great. And the third thing, which you mentioned, is you're essentially becoming the potential of a green Amazon.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to. I mean, we really want to empower everyday people to be able to access lower GHG projects and also to be able to invest in it. Right now, there's no easy way for just a regular person to invest in this exciting new space.
No, and I think as you educate, I mean, as we've got to educate people. They don't realize that where does all of our energy come from? I applaud all the Teslas on the road, all the electric vehicles. But ask people where that electricity comes from. It doesn't come from a bunch of elves in an oak tree, making electricity. It comes a lot of it comes from natural gas, which is creating our greenhouse gases. So it's not a trivial problem, as you've already stated. But I think I'm fascinated. I could spend here the rest of the day talking to you and learning more about what you're doing. But I wish you very, very well. It's a very exciting effort.
Well, thanks for hosting us. It's exciting to hear about your work too in green hydrogen, and I would love to connect after. And Mary, it's such an honor to be here. I'm so glad that you're facilitating these conversations for folks.
No problem. Thank you both. We appreciate it very much. And I just want to say, hang on just a second and say goodbye to everybody else. If you're watching this or hearing about it on podcast places, wherever you get it, iTunes, Apple, all that, go to frontrunnersinnovate.com where you'll get the bio information and links to how you can reach out to these two wonderful, let's see, climate friendly people that we want to definitely put in front of you again sometime so that we can keep up with what they're doing, because both of them are working on something that is not quite yet there, but almost. So we definitely want to keep up. So thank you, Don, very much for co-hosting, and Tiffany, a pleasure to meet you. And I feel like we're going to be keeping up with you for quite some time. This is a fascinating subject, and one that we hope that all the businesses out there are watching and learning from. So thanks again. Bye-bye, everybody.